Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rate and review all the kings of Persia from Diocles to Yazdegerd III. I'm Sariel, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, and my pronouns are he, him.
Let's do it! What is it today?
Woo! Hello, everybody. Today is episode 82.1.
Right.
Khosrow the First, part 1.
I am excited and also scared about how long
Yes,
these episodes
you
are
should
going to be.
Yes, it will be a lot. This man is chunky. So we will find out what that's like. But first of all, a caveat on pronunciation. Khosrow sounds rude in Persian. I know, I'm sorry. It's not a sound my mouth can make properly. But if Pupienus can exist for the Romans, Khosrow can exist for us as well.
Exactly. I feel like...
It's similar to the Arabic pronunciation, so I'm doing what I can. I'm trying to localize it to the English language. In the correct way, Sariel, you have this sound in your language. Instead of a k, it's meant to be like a Spanish J. So pronounce it properly.
Khosrow.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, that's fine. I don't...
I can't do that, but since we're going to be speaking in English, I will assume Khosrow is going to have to do sorry, audience, or, well, you're welcome, whichever.
You bring up a worthy point that if Pupienus could survive the Totalis Rankium podcast, Khosrow will be okay in ours.
Yeah,
and people can get a laugh out of it. You're welcome.
That'll be good times. So yes, Ariel, what do you remember from, well, not exactly last time, 2 times ago is what was relevant, and what are your expectations for Khosrow?
Okay, I remember that we were doing badly, and I originally didn't have huge expectations for him, but you mentioned it was a 2-part episode, and then I was like, oh, okay, now I'm very excited, because it means that he actually gets to, like, do something.
Yeah.
Or, you know, at least a lot happens where we have a lot of information. I do not remember where we left off, though. Like, I remember my feelings about it. I do not remember the actual facts.
If I mention Kavad and Mazdakism, does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I remember that there was a huge thing about the direction that the religion was taking.
Yes.
And how it could benefit. Right. It was like asking people to be kind to one another and then also taking power away. Like using the tenets of Mazdakism whenever it was benefiting to the crown, but then the moment it got to, like, the natural progression of what Mazdakism was saying is, well, then why would you have a king? It doesn't make sense to have someone above everyone else. And then the king was like, okay, we're just not going to pay attention to that part.
Okay, now it's time to brutally suppress everyone.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Good.
Like, we got to a good place using this religion, and the next step would be to lose the king and the court, and I'm just going to stop it before that. Yeah.
Yes, but as long as it inconveniences the nobles, great. As soon as it inconveniences me, no. Everybody is getting punished for this. So, yeah. Well, we know Khosrow is going to be interesting. Do you think it's going to be a long, glorious reign? Everything goes well for our boy Khosrow? Or do you think it's going to be everything slightly collapses, but it's going to collapse in an entertaining way?
Don't ask me these questions. That's... I'm hoping not everything collapses, but maybe part 1 is prosperous and part 2 is a descent. I don't know.
Well, we'll find out. At least today we'll find out if it's good and everything is fine. All right, so let me recap the reign of Kavad briefly so we can know at what point we are and what was going on. So as you mentioned last time, Kavad was originally put on the throne by Sukra as a puppet king to, just be manipulated. But Kavad managed to defeat Sukra, outmaneuver him politically, have him killed.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Then Kavad decided to crack down on the nobility by using Mazdakism, which had these principles of common ownership and refusing the accumulation of wealth. So he used that against the nobility. This ended up in Kavad being imprisoned in the Fortress of Oblivion.
Right, that was very badass and terrifying.
Yes. He then managed to escape, get an army from the Hephthalites, re-invade the kingdom, come back, and then he sort of pulled back a bit on Mazdakism, started a bunch of reforms that would take more than a lifetime to complete, but he started the work. Let's see if Khosrow gets to finish it. And then he fought a couple of wars with the Hephthalites, avenging his father Peroz. Quite nice. And then he fought with the Romans. One war at the start under Emperor Anastasius, which went reasonably well. We got more money. Love it. And a second war now with the new Roman Emperor Justinian, which is still ongoing now that Kavad has died. So
I remember
they
my
were
fear.
getting close to the end of it, but now that Kavad is dead, the war is still ongoing, and we need to close that up.
Yeah, our king died without finishing that, and now we'll see.
Yes. So let's find out what happens. So who is Khosrow? Where is he from? Well, Khosrow is also known as Khosrow Anushiravan, which means of the immortal soul.
Damn.
Yeah. That's a nice epithet to have.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
I'm already off to a great start in my book.
And he was born in around 512 or 514, when his father's reign had been consolidated once more after the turmoil and usurpation by Jamasp. So everything was getting stable again. This isn't a puppeted and terrified Kavad that he is born to. This is a Kavad who is strong and secure in his power. And Khosrow's mother was not the Hephthalites princess that Kavad had married, but the sister of a prominent Sassanid general of the Ispabadan family, which will be important in the next rest of the podcast.
In the next forever.
Yes, in the next as long as the Empire exists. So good.
Talk about echoes in eternity.
Yes, very much. So, well, we know that Khosrow was given the best possible education. He was made to memorize the Avesta, the holy book of Zoroastrianism. He learned literature, history, and eloquence on the academic side. And on the physical side, he was trained to ride, shoot with a bow, and wield spear and axe. But he also had other academic interests, such as astronomy, music, how to sing, and how to be an expert chess player. Because guess what, Zariel? An early version of the game of chess has been invented and imported from India. We've gotten to the invention of chess.
Wait, so chess is not yet a thing? Because I am aware that it comes from the area and that it is really old, but I figure it would have been invented already.
It is being invented now in the 6th century. It is starting to become a thing. The rules will still change a lot. Like, I think the last official rule change was in, like, the early 1900s or something. The en passant rule, which is...
the en passant.
I refuse to acknowledge.
I mean, like,
fair enough.
People just, you can just make up rules, I guess.
I mean, there's fairy chess. But anyway, Cyril, do you know what checkmate means?
I guess not. Wait, 1 second. I'm thinking of the Spanish expression for it, which is jaque mate.
It has the same origin, I think, in most European languages, the ones that I know of at least.
I guess no, I don't.
Well, it comes from the Persian shah mat, which means the king is dead.
Ooh.
So it has been filtered through several different societies and languages, and that's how we get it.
I mean, that's how I would have translated it, but that's just because that's what it means in the game, right? I don't actually know what the words mean.
And yeah, so Khosrow is getting up on this hip new game that all the kids are playing called chess. So that's neat.
Amazing.
The Shahnameh says that an Indian king sent a chessboard with only the pieces, with no instructions, and set a challenge for the sages of Iran to understand how to play the game, with the only hint that the rules of the game are those of war.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it is a war game. Like, that is the setting of the game, war, but like, what do you mean? Like, there are no rules in war and love, so there, yes. Anarchy chess for everyone.
Yes, you can move all the pieces, however, as long as you inspire them enough. And when you get to the far east of the world, and they'll stop following you, and you have to turn back and eventually die of drunkenness at 33.
This sounds familiar.
That's yes. That's Alexander chess. It's a new version.
everything should just be anarchy chess. I haven't had that much fun as when in checking the r/anarchy chess subreddit in a while. Anyway, so the rules.
But yeah, in the story, Khosrow's vizier then figured out the specific rules and sent back a challenge to the Indians. He sent him the game of Nard, which is an ancestor to backgammon.
Ah.
And told the Indians, okay, if you're so clever, try and figure out this new game we invented.
I thought backgammon was like from the Far East, from like the region of like China.
It's apparently from the Middle East.
Huh. I don't know much about games, so like, this is fair. I just do not know my stuff.
And yeah, according to the legend, the Indians were unable to figure out how to play this game, so they paid tribute to Iran. Hooray. Game diplomacy. It's like chess between the Soviet Union and the US. It's trying to...
Okay, how do you like define this though? Because like, you can say, oh, figure out how to play this, and like, you can come up with a game, right?
Yeah,
like,
I don't...
Like, why does it count that it's like the right rules, quote unquote, when like you can just make up rules? Like, you can make up a game, and why would they tell you it's the wrong ones? Like, you can play it, so
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if they were asking you to properly balance the game and make sure it was fun and just like have the most fun version of the game. And
here, it's a better version of your game.
Yeah. So, lots of fun games. Khosrow gets to have a lot of interesting developments, and as we'll find out in the future, he is fond of foreign things. He thinks they're cool, and we should use more of them if they're good.
Yeah?
That's
fair.
Fair enough. An agreeable stance. But anyway, when Khosrow was growing up, he had two brothers who would normally be expected to precede him on the throne. They were two older brothers. The eldest brother was a man called Kavuz, who had been given control over the region of Tabaristan, which is south of the Caspian Sea. And the second oldest brother was called Jamasp. So why is Khosrow succeeding? Well, both of these brothers had issues. Because Kavuz was quite sympathetic to the Mazdakite heresy, so that won't do. He's going to destroy society. His father already tried, that didn't work out, so let's leave him out of the succession. While the second brother, Jamasp, had lost an eye in battle, so he's no longer whole of body, and that doesn't really work anymore to be king. Like, both of these weren't really automatic exclusions. It's not that there's a law that says you can't absolutely do this, but it was reason enough that Kavad could say, this is my reasons for not making these sons my heirs, and everybody would say, yeah, fair enough. We see where you're coming from. So, hooray! Khosrow is the heir.
Hey!
And apparently, he was clever and bright enough that Kavad thought, yeah, this kid's gonna go places. He deserves this.
Amazing.
Let's go. And yeah, as we saw in Kavad's episode, Kavad tried to solidify his choice of Khosrow by having him adopted by the Roman Emperor Justin I.
Oh.
But last time...
that didn't work.
Khosrow went all the way to the border, and he got told by the Romans, oh, we can adopt you as a barbarian if you like.
It was humiliating. It was the worst.
That is not good.
Like, I still feel it in my... like, I have secondhand shame for this.
Yes.
Like... and a lot of anger towards the Romans, of course.
Khosrow will have anger against the Romans. Yeah, we will see how that turns out. And yeah, this eventually ended up in, it was not the only cause, but one of the causes of the war between Justinian and Kavad, which was closing up when Kavad died. So yeah, in 531, the succession came into sharp focus when Kavad fell fatally ill, and he had to make a final decision. So Kavad wanted to make absolutely sure that everybody knew he wanted Khosrow as his heir. There are no other options. I mean, yes, there are, but they're not good ones. So
there are, but no.
What I said. Okay, please, for the love of God, I was a great king. Don't mess this up. The succession is the worst part of all this. So Kavad wrote a publicly available will where he named the either 17 or 19-year-old Khosrow as his own heir, and said, everybody should be clear he's my heir. Done. But, Serial, ambition is made of sterner stuff than wills and laws, so we're not sure if it's just before the death of Kavad or just after it. But in any case, Kavus, the eldest son, the Mazdakite son, who was ruling in the province of Tabaristan, made an alliance with all the Mazdakites to place him on the throne instead of Khosrow.
Okay.
So he's saying, hey, do you want to reform society? Help me overthrow my brother and I'll do it. I will tear down the old order and restart everything, and we can have monarcho-communism and see how that turns out.
Well, it would be a fun experiment, you know.
We could see how that turns out. I mean, Kavad tried. We kind of know how that turns out. It turns out with you being deposed by the nobles.
Yeah.
So,
Again, the nobles is why we can't have nice things.
I mean, we've sort of softened the power of the nobles, but...
Yeah. And we should continue to.
Yeah, it'll take generations to properly beat them down into submission. So, let's see.
You know, looking at the world nowadays, it'll take forever.
Yes.
We're not there yet.
Time. Yeah. So, alright, you have these two rivals. Who do you think the nobles side with?
Who is promising them more power?
Well, we have Khosrow, who is the legitimate heir, and Kavus, who is the Mazdakite heir. Who do you think they'd side with?
But the Mazdachaism was like against that sort of power, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think they will go with the legitimate heir.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Not because it's legitimate. Clearly, they have shown that they can just do whatever they want, but because it benefits them better.
Yeah, so they see, okay, if the Mazdakites take over, that's going to mean a lot of trouble for the nobles. Let's make Khosrow, he'll be our champion. Yeah. So they vote for him, make him king of kings. Huzzah. What do you think the Romans do, Serial? Because we're still at war when the succession crisis starts. Who do you think the Romans see as legitimate?
Probably the non-legitimate heir, because they would just want to put more gasoline into the fire.
That's correct. The Romans say, oh, Kavus is new king. Okay, great, love it. Khosrow, who are you? You're just some pretender. You're not.
Of course.
You're not worth negotiating.
They're just like, let me just, let me get my hands in there and just make it worse for everybody.
Yeah. So, a great army is gathered on both sides, and there is a massive bloody clash. We don't have much detail on what exactly happens, but in the end, Khosrow manages to defeat his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes through an extremely bloody purge to make sure that everybody understands he's in charge. It was written here by the previous King of Kings. Also, Romans, look at me, Romans. I'm the only heir possible, okay? Don't mess with me.
Look at my eyes. You repeat after me.
Khosrow is the only heir.
Yes.
Good. Done. So, Khosrow kills all of his brothers. I feel a bit bad for Jamasp, who didn't do anything, but, sucks to be him, I guess.
No.
And then he executed all the nobles and Mazdakites priests that had supported the rebellion. But Khosrow also realized that Mazdakism was too dangerous to be left alive. It was still around, and he had to absolutely break it and make sure that it could no longer be a force in the empire. So he decided to kill all the heads of the movement.
That will do it.
Serial ruthlessness is mercy upon ourselves.
Oh, good epic mention. But yeah, I guess that has a point. It's just really ruthless to do.
Yeah.
He's not going to be called anything like the merciful or the benevolent or the fun guy of good times.
Or at least not before he's eliminated every threat to his power.
Yeah. I'm still thinking of that other really good king that, way back, that assassinated his entire family just to, prevent revolt, but then also had the issue when looking for an heir that he had assassinated his entire family. Who was this?
Oh, Artaxerxes III,
yes.
I think it is.
I knew it was an Artaxerxes. I couldn't
back,
remember which one.
Yeah, he killed all of his hundreds of siblings, and then when he was assassinated, he had a child as heir.
Yeah.
That was not a good day the
Yep.
Achaemenid Empire. And then Alexander showed up the next week. And it was
Yep.
like, oh no, everything's on fire. Well,
I
can you
guess.
see where this is going, Sarah? Anyway. So, what did Khosrow do to destroy the Mazdakites? Well, he convened a council where the Orthodox Zoroastrians and the Christians demolished the Mazdakite theological arguments. So he destroyed them with facts and logic. Then he destroyed them physically.
Yep.
Because we're told
Okay.
that he had all the Mazdakites' leaders buried in the ground with their feet in the air. He then invited Mazdak, the prophet, to look at his beautiful garden to see the seeds that he had sown and how they had now borne fruit. Mazdak cried out and fainted. As you would,
Yeah.
having seen your faithful followers buried alive.
Yeah. Oof.
Mazdak was then tied to a post and shot to death with arrows.
Very Saint Sebastian
Very
imagery.
much, yes.
Oof.
Ferdowsi ends this chapter of the Shahnameh by saying, "If you are wise, do not follow the path of Mazdak."
But like, it was a gamble, right? Like his intentions weren't terrible, and like we have opposing forces all the time. It's just
It could have worked out, but
Yeah.
it didn't. I mean, this is what happened to Mani as well. He almost changed the religion,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Like
then you get martyred.
what I'm thinking is, for how many times we've seen this happen in history, for the Shahnameh to give this as the moral of a story of like, don't do that because that was silly. I'm like, what? This was not like the worst usurpation attempt we've seen. It wasn't even like truly an usurpation attempt. It was like a contingency of like two possible, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not the right word, but yeah, an opposition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we've seen way worse, where truly you look at the person and you're like, yeah, you got what was coming for you, and I don't know how you saw
Yeah.
this going right in any way, and that was a ridiculous idea. So it's very funny to me that the Shahnameh is like, oh, don't do this, because she was unwise. And I'm like, I mean, I don't know. It just didn't work out for
Remember,
him. But
kids,
like,
don't try to overthrow the established order.
if you don't risk big, you don't win big, apparently.
Yeah. And I mean, you could see this as hubris on Mazdak's part, where he
Sure,
could have
yeah.
just accepted what Kavad wanted and said, no, we do need a king, though.
I mean, that is true,
like,
yeah.
the nobles, yeah, but we do need
I don't
a king,
think,
guys.
in
Everybody
general, it's a
chill.
good idea to, like, bring up an opposition. If anything, because it
I mean,
brings...
if it had been successful, sure,
yeah,
amazing.
like,
but-
it's not a good idea for, like, the greater good, because it's going to bring instability, unless you think the ruler that is going to be elected is going to be, like, such a terrible decision. But
Mhm.
Kavad also had been like, oh, this is the person who should
Yeah.
rule. This is my
Yeah,
heir.
that was silly.
So, yeah. Yeah,
Choices were made.
for sure, yeah.
But yes, after spilling all of this blood,
Yeah.
Khosrow can finally sit safe on the throne, and was crowned either on the 13th of September or the 18th of August of the year 531. So, congratulations, power is secured. But we're still at war with the Romans.
Yeah. We have dealt with one crisis,
Yes.
now we face the other crisis.
Yes, absolutely soaked in blood, Khosrow turns to Justinian and says, "Do you want to make peace now? Am I legitimate enough for you?"
This is a great image. Maybe I'll take this for the portrait, because that is so good.
Yes.
Of like, just has lost a couple of teeth, is, after this entire battle, turns around and is like, do you want to go? or do we call it?
Fight me, loser. See how it ends.
Mm-hmm.
So at last, we shall have a peace. Justinian says, "Okay, you look scary. Sure, let's do a peace. I was planning on doing something in the West anyway, so let's make a peace." And they sign a great treaty, Serial. We've
Oh.
solved everything forever. This
Oh,
treaty is
wow.
called the Eternal Peace. How long
Is
do you think
it?
it lasts?
Like a year.
No, you're so pessimistic, Serial.
Well,
I wouldn't take that from you.
I'm just going off of previous data. Okay.
Apparently, the eternal peace means that eternity is approximately 8 years. But we gave it a shot.
Okay, so eternity is not that terrible, I guess.
In the terms of the peace, the Romans would hand over 5.5 tons of gold for the protection of the Caucasus.
Oof.
And this was made all together, not in yearly payments, so Khosrow can't claim that technically the Romans are paying tribute.
Okay.
So,
but that way
fine.
we have the money. So I guess.
Yeah, we have the money anyway, that's good. And then the Romans give us a couple of forts in Armenia, just to square things out. At the same time, Khosrow is abandoning a few Roman-facing forts in the Caucasus, so there's just a small border change. This war is kind of a status quo. We've just changed the way the money is spread out. So, fine, cool. In the end, both sides are kind of happy with this outcome, because Justinian wanted to reconquer the West, and Khosrow was still probably concerned about the Hephthalites, and wanted to make absolutely sure that his succession was secure, and that nobody tried to take advantage of the situation to attack him.
Mm-hmm.
But it does look like the Romans made a few more concessions than the Sassanids, suggesting that Justinian was probably more anxious to end the war before it got out of hand, and he lost the opportunities that he saw in the West. So it's broadly more on our side, but it's not a massive change. And apparently, when Justinian headed west, Khosrow knew that the expedition couldn't have happened without him agreeing to the peace. So he wrote to Justinian saying, "Hey, can you send me my share of the loot from Africa, because we both know you couldn't have done this without me." And Justinian was a good sport and actually did send some of the money to Iran and said, "Yeah, that's
because I was going to say, bold move of asking for payment, like in retrospect, of like, hey, you know what? I think I helped with that. Wild.
Yeah, you couldn't have done this on a war on two fronts, so there we go. Okay, so finally, Khosrow gets to rule without war. We're doing reasonably well. Everything is mostly fine. And as you would expect, the Zoroastrian clergy praise Khosrow for his early so-called reign of steel in defense of religious orthodoxy. You know, the purges.
The fun times. Yeah.
Yeah. And this would also be the main theme of state propaganda during his reign, and according to the later Arabic historian al-Masudi, he killed about 80,000 Mazdakites to permanently suppress the religion and make sure that this would never rise again. They would never be a political threat to his reign. And it's also interesting that Khosrow starts to invest in a bit of fake history, because we get one of the sources that we read for Ardashir I, the founder of the empire. The letter of Tansar claims to be a letter by a Zoroastrian leader to Ardashir I, and might have been based on an actual document, but we're not sure. Because in this letter, the Parthians are presented as degenerates who had let the religion fall by the wayside, while the Sassanid dynasty is praised for its union of church and state. Not only that, but the use of extreme violence is justified to re-establish the correct social order, just as Khosrow had done in the aftermath of the Mazdakite rebellion. And the correct social order is emphasized because Khosrow does not want to return to the old corrupt nobility, but place them once again in service to the crown. So it's Khosrow basically not exactly publishing this document, but making sure this document is placed in the religious literature, saying, I'm not just making this up. I'm not making it up that the king is meant to be powerful and not have to care about the nobles. This was how the empire was always from the beginning, and that's how it's going to return to be again. So, a little bit of Darius in there. A little bit of saying, it's always been this way, shut up, I'm not changing anything.
Yeah.
This is how it's meant to be.
That's always so, I love these storylines because they scare me, but they show such power. More so in the fact that we know that they, reshape history, which then you could say that, they failed at some point, right? Because you can still piece it together. But for the people at the time, it probably,
Yeah, I mean, for the people at the time, they probably thought, yeah, fair enough. Because this was reconstructed by later historians who looked at the history of Ardashir I and said, that doesn't really match with what we see. It's maybe a little bit, but it's not exactly there. This feels more like a document written in Khosrow's time as opposed to something
that's so cool. I love that.
That's interesting to see.
I don't support rewriting history, but I support, Cool, narratively.
Yes. Figuring it out,
Yeah.
yes. But Khosrow doesn't only have a reign of steel, he has also a more velvety side to his reign, because he makes sure to return the lands taken by the Mazdakites to their rightful owners, and was said to treat noble orphans whose parents were killed in the revolts as his own children. And he provided for their marriages and dowries. At the same time, well, if you have a bunch of orphaned nobles who owe everything that they are to you, that's going to be convenient for the future, isn't it? You now have a whole generation of nobles who have grown up and owe their livelihoods to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to make things a lot easier.
Yes. Keeping them under control. Great.
Yeah. Khosrow then set about restoring the villages destroyed during the Mazdakite rebellions. He bought new animals for the farmers and repaired all the bridges and infrastructure that had been destroyed during the uprisings, because he does kind of need the empire to work properly. That is an important bit of everything. But Khosrow wasn't a fundamentalist. He is said to have been fond of innovations, investigating Greek and Indian cultures with special attention to philosophy, astronomy, and medicine. And yeah, as we mentioned earlier, this is supposedly when the game of chess was introduced from India.
Mm-hmm.
So he likes a lot of foreign things. He thinks they're interesting and he wants to look more into them. A Roman source, Agathias, also tells us that he was very fond of literature and especially knowledgeable about Aristotle and Plato, especially their mathematics, which he thought was very good. Although Agathias, our source, does wonder, and I quote, "How could the purity and nobility of those time-honored writings, with all their exactitude and felicity of expression, be preserved in an uncouth and uncivilized tongue?" So it's good to see the Romans never change.
Yep.
And Agathias is wondering, wait, but how could a Persian understand these things? That sounds unreasonable. What do you mean?
Clearly, they're not just humans like us. There must be some mistake.
Yeah, he isn't clearly just a very cultured king who can read Greek and understand it and just enjoys reading these books and understanding what they talk about. No.
No. That would put us on like a similar level, like societally and emotionally, and I would have to rethink my entire worldview and my entire
wrong.
How the empire works. We can't have that.
Yeah, then we would have been wrong to not adopt him as a civilized person, but as a barbarian.
And we're not wrong. We're the Roman Empire. We're never wrong.
Yeah. And basically, Agathias ends this thought by saying that, well, you know what? For a barbarian, he was really clever. You know, guys, for the type of person he was one of the good ones.
My god.
It's okay. Agathias, please don't.
Pretty smart for a barbarian, you know.
Yeah.
God. He was so close. He was so close. Yeah. He was right there.
Yeah.
We can't have nice things.
Agathias goes on to tell us that when a philosopher came to visit Khosrow's court, Khosrow was really interested and asked him a bunch of questions, asking him about the origin of the physical world and whether the universe will last forever, or whether one should posit that the universe began existing at one point and then it was just going to exist forever or might end. So it's a bunch of interesting cosmological questions. So he is clearly a man who's interested in philosophy and how that works.
Mm.
And also, our pal Justinian did a silly thing in the West. Because he closed the Platonic Academy in Athens. Because it was pagan.
What?
And you're a Christian empire now. You should close this down.
Justinian, why?
Yes.
Why are you doing this?
So Khosrow looked at all these newly unemployed philosophers and said, hey, you all want a job at my house?
Honestly, yes.
I have a bunch of money to
good.
give you. Yeah. And so he invited them all to the empire and said, if you want to stay, feel free. You can have a stipend to just philosophize and do cool things.
Yeah, and I want you here, so I'll pay for your research, essentially.
Yeah. We're told that a few of these philosophers did become homesick and return west after the culture shock.
That's fine.
When the customs changed. But Khosrow specifically asked Justinian to make sure that these philosophers coming home would not be persecuted for their religion, that they were important people and they were clever, and you shouldn't persecute people. Don't look at the Mazdakites.
So, don't look at what we're doing here.
Don't question it. But when
we can't
you do
be
it,
perfect,
it's
you
wrong.
know?
Yes.
So is Justinian going to listen to us?
I didn't receive any follow-up. Apparently these people just disappear into history.
Huh.
I mean, since it was a term of the peace treaty, you would assume that it was taken care of, since it's one of the simpler ones. It's like, don't persecute these a few dozen clever people.
Yeah.
Justinian was a smart man. You would assume he was fine with that. But a lot of these clever philosophers brought a bunch of interesting things to the empire. Several Greek and Syriac texts on all manner of philosophy, medicine, physics, metaphysics, just general thoughts about the
just,
world.
Shower thoughts that are interesting.
Just smart stuff. And Khosrow decided, you know what, let's all translate these into the Persian language. I'll build a massive library. We can put all these books in there, and we can collect books from all over the world. That'll be neat.
Yeah, I bet nobody has done that before.
Yeah, I bet this is an entirely new idea.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. Good ideas are allowed to be repeated.
So, Khosrow founded an academy in a place called Gondishapur, called the Academy of Gondishapur.
Ah, wow.
Yeah. Cleverly enough. Which would be a great library for all the empire, with a particular emphasis on the study of medicine, both for mental and physical health.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
That's so nice. See, guys, we figured it
Clever.
out before. And now have to figure it out again.
Time is a flat circle. But yeah, so great was the collection of knowledge from all around the known world that the Academy of Gondishapur would become the model and base for the Baghdad House of Wisdom centuries down the line, and the seed for the Islamic Golden Age. That is extremely and extraordinarily cool. And is how we get algebra and appendectomies in the Middle Ages.
Yeah,
which is wild.
So cool.
How does that happen? Damn. The medical research that was conducted in this academy was generally conducted on prisoners condemned to death.
Yeah.
And the text I read was ambiguous on whether these were dissections or live tests. I'm hoping the former. Because,
yeah, I
mean,
hope
medical
it's just...
research is important, but be humane, please.
I hope it is just corpses of people who have been,
you
killed.
hope. Yeah.
Victorian style, like you study from like criminals that were, condemned, which is not problematic at all. It's fine.
But, we do need to figure out how bodies work, so I guess, it's messy.
Yeah, but like people die all the time, You don't.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But in any case, the Academy welcomed scholars from across the empire, many of them coming from India, while others were Nestorian Christians, who brought knowledge from East and West. Though it looks like traditional Greek medicine was the basis of their study, so that was what they were starting from, and then they added in some Indian knowledge and some just general Mesopotamian knowledge, some Persian knowledge. It was all sort of a nice mixture of things. We even have an autobiography from one doctor and translator called Borzuya, who translated many Indian texts into Persian to disseminate them across the empire. And in the end, this institution would last for centuries to come until it was eventually folded into the institutions born of the Islamic Golden Age. It's also possible that these and other future reforms were done in a spirit of competition with Justinian, who was also trying to start a golden age for his empire.
Yeah.
So it was basically looking at the Romans and saying, "Oh no, they're doing something
Honestly,
cool. We must do something cool now."
I am fine with this. I'm fine with people being like, "Oh, I can be more enlightened than you."
Yeah, it's basically the space race for late antiquity. It's like, "Oh no, you did cool stuff. We must do more cool stuff. Wait. Oh no, invest more in science and literature and arts, quickly."
We need more of this.
It's also in this period, by the way, that we get the formalization of Zoroastrian holy texts and the compilation of the Sassanid Book of Kings, which is going to be the basis for later Arabic and Persian sources that we've been using. So we're getting a lot of information from now on, because this is when the sources that our sources are using are being written. So we get a lot more of detail and understanding of what's going on. So that's neat. Khosrow also greatly expanded and embellished the heart of the empire, building some of the most recognizable Sassanid palaces, such as Takekizra, which there will be an image of it in the episode notes, but I will show Serial what it looks like and what it was meant to look like. So, to the left is Takekizra, to the right is something in Samarkand which kind of looks similar to it, but is sort of following on that tradition. Essentially, this is a massive hall where the king would receive guests. It is 35 meters high and was meant to essentially project shock and awe to anybody who saw this, because it was the largest building of its kind for centuries and is still currently the largest unsupported brick dome in
that's
the world.
the thing. Like, that is so impressive, because we're used to skyscrapers and whatever, right?
Yes.
But this is an enormous empty space, and I don't think an image translates it well enough to like what it must feel to be in there and like have the weird realization of like feeling like the building might collapse on you, because it's just a gigantic dome.
Yeah, and I've been to something that is, I think, remotely inspired on it, like hundreds of years later. But something of that size is really quite awe-inspiring to just walk under. And, imagine you're a peasant coming from a small house, and then you go to, give your petition to the King of Kings, and it's this thing that is larger than anything you have ever seen, gloriously painted and shining with gold and paintings all across. It's really quite impressive.
It's beautiful. Because, like, I've been inside a cathedral, right? And that is very awe-inspiring, because it is just really tall, like tall, empty space.
Yes.
So you just look up and it's this incredible building. But, like, you have columns and arches and, all sorts of things going through. You usually have a dome or two, but, like, they don't span the entirety of the body of the cathedral, right? Like, so, yeah.
Yeah, this is basically the equivalent of what Justinian is doing with the Hagia Sophia. It's just the most incredible work of architecture you could imagine. And yeah, this is essentially the largest single-span vault of unreinforced brickwork ever made, and was, I was wrong, 37 meters tall. And it's an open reception hall decorated with elaborate tapestries and Greek mosaics, with artists either gifted by Justinian or taken from Justinian, depending on the source.
Gifted by,
Yes. Gifted or quote-unquote gifted.
Gifted voluntarily or involuntarily.
Yeah. And all these showed all of Khosrow's achievements across the walls, present and future. So there were the Siege of Antioch, which we'll find out about later, and scenes of Khosrow himself in battle against the Romans. And then under this vast painted vault, Khosrow would receive petitioners, nobles, priests, and foreign ambassadors. Though Khosrow himself would be behind a curtain, allowing only a select few to be directly in his presence. Very much like Diocles a millennium and a half ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say very Wizard of Oz of him.
Yes. And if you were in the distance, Ariel, you could see a tiny chain coming down from the center of the ceiling down to about seat level. And at the end of this chain would be Khosrow's massive crown.
On a
Why is it hanging on the end of a chain, Serial?
Oh, because it is so heavy that he can't actually wear it?
The crown weighed 92 kilos, so it would snap his neck if he tried to wear it.
Wait, so if the... Heavy is the crown. Like, if the chain snapped, like, you could just assassinate the king with his own crown.
I thought this was very much Sword of Damocles, but it's a cool image in any case. It's very
it is wonderful, but
appropriate.
I don't think it's a great idea, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the same image like the Iron Throne, where it's like a king can never sit easy. You're always under threat. And this massive crown hanging from the ceiling is there.
True.
And apparently we even found like the ring in the ceiling that was holding up the crown, although we don't have the crown, sadly.
Yeah, well, I
it
feel
was
like
made
that would
of
be
precious
that would
materials
be
and was
taken away
melted
soon.
down properly. But that's really cool. And also, in case you were wondering, Cyril, if you ever find yourself in front of a king of kings, the correct form of address is your divinity.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Because, yeah, you must. We're also told that Khosrow was especially humane and a defender of the common people. Although, this is him telling us, so it's nice that that's at least the foot he's putting forward, not like the Assyrians that say, we will gut you and enjoy all the time.
Yep.
And in one anecdote, a Roman ambassador came to the royal palace and noticed that the square in front of the royal palace wasn't square. It had an irregularity in it.
Huh.
And so he asked Khosrow and said, okay, why is the square a little bit off? Is
it on purpose?
Construction work going on? Is there something off? And when he asked about it, he was told that apparently an old woman had a house there and she didn't really want to sell it. So Khosrow said, all right, fine, I guess.
Oh my god!
Because he said that this asymmetry was more beautiful than a symmetry that would have evicted this old woman.
Oh, that's really sweet and actually nice, because governments evict people all the time. So I don't know if he, like, how serious he was about it, but I appreciate that.
Yeah. Also, in general about religion and about the Mazdakites, we're told that while previous kings would just kill heretics on capture, Khosrow would imprison them for a year, during which they would be taught the proper religion.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the year, they were told, hey, do you want to convert or die?
Yeah. Now that you've been shown the proper religion.
Yeah. Like, you're given a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So,
aren't we
not
nice?
ideal, but baby steps. It's an improvement, I suppose. And yeah, as we mentioned during Kavad's episode, reforms are ongoing, and Khosrow would continue these reforms, reorganizing taxation, the army, and administration, but we'll go more in depth on those later.
Mm-hmm.
We should also mention that all this innovation didn't go all easily because the nobles plotted to bring a nephew of Khosrow, basically a son of Jamasp, the one-eyed brother.
Yes.
They tried to bring this guy to the throne. Khosrow managed to quickly suppress this coup and execute the noble in charge. Although Procopius tells us that Khosrow ordered the pretender killed, but he was hidden away by a noble because he was a child at the time, and then he later escaped to Justinian.
I see.
We don't know if
Running
this is the
away
case,
to the
or if an
Romans.
imposter showed up, but hey. But Serial, Roman time.
Every time I'm like, I have to sigh.
Yes. This time it's our fault, don't worry. Because we mentioned the eternal peace doesn't last forever. Shocker.
The 8-year eternal peace.
How does the war restart then? Because Khosrow claimed that the Roman Arab allies, these Ghassanids, had attacked the Sassanid Arab allies, the Lakhmids. So this was probably justification enough to invade Syria. But at one point, Jessica came over to Khosrow with a letter from the mystical lands of the far west, where the Ostrogoths had sent a letter. Do you know where the Ostrogoths live, Serial?
Isn't that like all the way in Europe and like Middle Europe, or?
The Ostrogoths were the ones who had occupied Italy after the fall of the West.
So south of Europe, I see.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like, I know these from Spanish history. Like they're close to that side of the Mediterranean.
Different types of Goths, yes.
Yeah.
They're families of Goths. And, well, the Ostrogoths had written to Khosrow saying, hey,
what's up, my friend?
Belisarius and all the Roman army is here in Italy attacking us. Would be a real shame if somebody were to start a war on two fronts against the Romans. Real shame. So maybe help us out? We get to keep bits of Italy, and you get to have fun in the East. And Khosrow thinks, yeah, sounds fair enough. That's pretty good. I don't want the Romans to win their war in Italy, because then they'll just become stronger, and if we attack them, love that. It's also at this point that a comet appeared in the sky.
Oh, I love omens.
Yeah. I love that Procopius, the historian of Justinian, tells us that it was an omen, but nobody was really sure what the omen was about.
Yeah.
Everybody thought, feels like something. Not sure what, but Something's going to happen, I assume.
I feel like that is a very open thing, though. Being like, oh,
Yeah.
this for sure means something. Couldn't tell you what, but it has to mean something.
Yeah. So Khosrow decided to invade the east of the Roman Empire. He decides to march into Syria. And he does a great job. He manages to quickly devastate Syria, moving along, and he manages to arrive all the way to Antioch and besiege it. The last person who'd besieged Antioch was Shapur I.
Damn.
That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Khosrow's doing well. And in the city of Antioch, there was an omen where the standards of the soldiers stationed there had previously been facing west. But then on their own, magically, they shifted to the east.
It wasn't the wind or something.
No, Sarah, that's silly. These standards were facing west, then they shifted east, and then returned west again, but they were left trembling.
Okay.
So everybody should fear Khosrow.
Yeah.
Khosrow then offered the inhabitants of Antioch, hey, you can pay me money and I'll leave.
I'm only here for the economy, so like, if you
Yes.
pay, I'll go.
But the Romans attacked his envoys, so Khosrow decided, okay, you're attacking my envoys? Okay, I'll kick your ass now. Good. Let's see what happens.
Now you pissed me off.
The city was assaulted, and the Romans were soon defeated. Antioch was taken, and Khosrow makes sure to leave an open direction for them to flee to avoid having to take it city street by city street.
Oh, how nice.
In the end, the city was sacked, with all the pain that comes with that. According to Procopius, who of course does not like Khosrow, Khosrow said aloud that he wasn't committing this massacre, it was Justinian's fault for not surrendering. He gave them the opportunity to surrender, they should have surrendered.
Was it though?
This is their fault now.
Agree to disagree, my friend.
The sack was so serious that Antioch was eliminated as a city of this relevance forever.
Oof.
It continued to exist, and it still does exist technically. But it would never again be as powerful as it was in this case.
So intense, actually.
Khosrow then decided to have some payback for the calling him a barbarian and saying that he wasn't worthy of being adopted.
Not worthy of being adopted, I'll show you who's not worthy of being adopted.
Yeah, and supporting his brother for heir. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not legitimate. I'm not legitimate. I'll show you who's not legitimate, Justinian. He deported all the population of Antioch to Mesopotamia to found a new city. What would you call this city, Serial? You've deported all the population of Antioch. Can you guess
New
what it would be
Antioch?
called?
I don't know.
Close, but better. The city was called Khosrow's Better Antioch.
Okay, that is much better. That is close but better, actually. Sorry, that really caught me off guard.
That was pretty good.
Like, that just reads like a joke. What are you gonna call the city? My own better version of the old city.
Yes, your old city can absolutely do one, Romans. Who's a barbarian now? Who's a barbarian now? So, nice. Apparently, the city was meant to be an exact replica of the original Antioch,
Oh, I see. So truly... Like,
with Khosrow importing stone from Syria to build it, and making sure that each of the citizens had their own house as they remembered it.
Really?
Apparently.
That is so cool. No, that is like surreal levels of cool. Of like, you
Yes.
are in a place that looks like another place, but it's not the place. Like, I'm sure something feels off and then you're like paranoid.
Well,
Paranoid.
Cyril, one of the citizens found something off. Khosrow was looking around and saying, how do you like your new city? Is it better than the original Antioch? Do you like it better? Do you like living under me? And one of the townspeople said, it's nice, I enjoy it. The house is basically like mine. It's basically the same. I just missed this one tree that was in front of my house, and it was really good, and it was lovely. The next day, the tree was there. Khosrow had it taken and
That is
moved there so it
amazing!
could be present.
And horrible for like the... I don't know if it's good for the tree, but like, that is so... Like, the level of commitment. I don't know.
Yes,
That's
I
great.
want this to be perfect.
That's
to be
great.
exact. The city had a hippodrome and a theater, and the citizens were given special privileges, among which the freedom to be Christian and a bunch of money each month so that they could live there and be happy to the greatest of their opportunities. And this is possibly where the mosaics for the Takekizor came from.
Damn.
And also the city was directly under Khosrow's supervision. He would govern it personally to make sure everything ran perfectly. Also, any Roman slaves who fled to this city were considered free and inviolable.
Amazing. I love this. I know that this is just a
Great.
you to the Romans, but like, yes.
But still.
I love that. Love that for us. That's wonderful.
Yeah. He also had the Monophysite Christians of the new city, which are separate from the Nestorians of the empire, elect their own religious leader who was de facto head of the city. So they can rule themselves, they're fine, they can do whatever. And according to Al-Tabari, the Christians of the empire long remembered Khosrow for his generosity towards them. Although, despite all this, I have to say as a caveat, one Roman source, and it's a Roman source, so, pinch of salt, tells us that some of the inhabitants of the city tried to escape back to Syria in the 570s, so several decades later, but they lacked support from the Roman emperor. But it's likely to just be Roman bias because it's been 50 years since the foundation of the city by that point.
Yeah.
And few of the original inhabitants must have been left, so it's possible, but who knows? It's possible that the city was filled with more recent Roman prisoners of war, and those were the ones who moved around, so who knows? But anyway, after capturing Antioch and moving it bodily to his empire...
It's wild. Like, the biggest power move.
Khosrow decided to extend a further middle finger to Justinian. He was flipping the bird with one hand, decides to extend a second hand to flip the bird with.
Let's
and
go.
he marched all the way to Seleucia, where the old Seleucid tombs were. Nice to see it again. That was fun. And on the Mediterranean, he bathed in the sea and had a lovely time saying, "Oh, there's no Romans here. That's weird. I can just bathe in the Mediterranean and everything's fine." Ha ha.
I went on vacation and nobody's bothering me.
He then asked the Roman ambassadors with him to guide the army to the city of Apamea, which then surrendered to Khosrow, having seen what happened to Antioch. The city then gave him all the wealth of the city, and they set up a chariot race for his entertainment.
Nice.
Where Khosrow took the traditional role of the Roman emperor. He took Justinian's box in the chariot race, and he made sure that Justinian's chariot team lost the race. Since the city surrendered willingly, Khosrow was merciful. He spared it from a sack. He even impaled one of his own men who had gone against this order and had tried to steal from one of the houses. He said, "No, don't. I want discipline in my army. You will not steal from these houses."
Yeah. Like, how dare you disobey the king?
He then continued on to the next cities without encountering organized Roman resistance and amassed a ridiculous amount of plunder. There is so much cash, he frankly doesn't know what to do with it anymore. In the end, Justinian was forced to buy a 1-year truce from Khosrow by paying 2.5 tons of gold to please leave. We're sorry. Just please leave us alone. And so Khosrow took his massive train of loot and slowly marched back to the empire, making sure he passed by all the Roman cities he went next to, just showing them that he could do what he wants.
This is such a win.
Not to worry, I have a permit. I can do what I want.
Justinian said it's fine. Take it up with him.
In general, Khosrow followed the tradition of the Shapurs by deporting the population of Syria into Mesopotamia, founding many cities, and organizing skilled workers into guilds under direct control of the king. Because he likes art, he likes foreign things, please build us cool things. That'd be nice. And in response to this attack, Belisarius could not finish up his conquest of Italy, and he was called back to the east. Belisarius refused to go to the east because he wanted to finish Italy.
Right.
Justinian was furious because Khosrow could just happily stroll through Syria with no opposition. And Belisarius got a good talking to after that.
But he was trying to do a good job,
But what is more important, Italy or Syria?
To the Romans?
Yeah. This war was later expanded after the extremely expensive truce ran out, when in 541, Khosrow was invited by the king of Lazica, in modern Georgia, to take over. This gave the Sassanids an important access to the Black Sea, which would have been excellent. So Khosrow spent some time there capturing a Roman fort, but he was eventually forced to return to Syria when Belisarius and his army finally arrived after a while.
Finally got to the party.
But things would not all go well. The Romans tried to start a counterattack through Armenia, but the Romans started to die a lot, and they start to sprout a bunch of black buboes
Oh no.
on their lymph nodes,
No. Go away.
and the fleas were
Avoid
spreading.
this. Like they say, you should avoid this.
Yes. The bubonic plague is coming. The first recorded instance of bubonic plague, also known as the plague of Justinian, is spreading through the empire.
Yeah.
Justinian himself would also get sick from this and be in a coma for several months.
He survived it?
He did.
Damn.
Theodora was taking care of everything. Theodora's cool. But hey.
Oof. Bad times.
So the war is sort of paused while everybody deals with the plague. The literal plague.
Yep.
They say, okay, time out, guys. Let's just die for a different reason now. But there was a problem inside the empire. Because Khosrow needs to look inwards to his own family. Because he had a son. Possibly his eldest, it's unclear. This son was called Anushzad, and was born of a Christian mother. And there are several versions of the story. One of them says he was imprisoned because he converted to Christianity. According to Ferdowsi, Khosrow said that he grieved and that this rose had only produced thorns. Other sources say that this son had converted to Manichaeism or Mazdakism. And one further source, Procopius, our source of Justinian, says that the son had seduced one of his father's wives. So, jail for you.
Jail for 1,000 years.
But towards the end of the war with the Romans, Khosrow fell ill. Possibly like Justinian, he also had the bubonic plague. We're not sure, but
very contagious.
Reasonable. Everybody's getting it. He might have it as well. And rumors of Khosrow's death spread around.
Oh no, but he's not dead! Guys! Stop!
Yes.
Stop!
According to some, these rumors were spread by Anushzad. So while this prince managed to escape from his imprisonment and gathered an army made up of Christians and prisoners, before writing a letter to the Roman emperor for support.
As you do, right?
According to the Shahnameh. And he was recognized as the rightful ruler. He then marched towards Ctesiphon against the regent that Khosrow had left in charge while he was at war. Khosrow told the regent, hey, no, I'm still alive. I'm writing a letter to you.
Guess what?
This is a rebellion. Stop this. March against my son. Capture him if you can, but kill him if you have to. Also, execute all the nobles who rose up with him, but not the common people. They were being tricked.
Yeah.
They didn't know any better.
I mean, like, not even if they're being tricked, like, they don't really get a say. So I feel like that's really fair.
Apparently, Khosrow said that the Christians among them will surrender if you yell at them loudly enough. So that'll be fine. The recommendation of what to do if Anushzad is captured is to spare him and confine him to his palace because he's still Khosrow's son. But he should brand the tongues of those who led him astray, because this is my son, he's misguided. He is not an evil person, but, you know, I'll give him a stern talking to when I come home.
When I recover from this plague.
Yes. The Shahnameh emphasizes how many Roman priests are with the rebels and says that Anushzad himself is wearing a Roman helmet in battle. So that's probably just, dramatic flair, but still. There is a battle, and the prince is given one last chance to surrender before the battle. He's told, your father's alive. This is a rebellion. You can stop now, but it's your last chance, my dude.
This might be a bad idea, just saying.
But Anushzad says, nope, I've committed already. My father's never going to trust me ever again. Anyway, I might as well just go in for it and see what happens. The die is cast.
Oh boy.
In the end, Anushzad was defeated in battle by the regent, but we get a few versions of how his life ends, or how his story ends at least.
Mm-hmm.
In one case, he dies in battle very dramatically. Of course, it's battle.
Yeah.
In another case, he's blinded.
Oh.
While in a third case, Khosrow decided to be very merciful, and his eyelids are just burned with a heated rod.
Oh.
So he's not blind, but he's quote-unquote damaged enough to be ineligible for the throne.
Oof.
With the rebellion ended, Khosrow does kill the ringleading nobles who rebelled against him, because you rebelled against me already once at the start of my reign. I showed you what happens if you rebel against me. I will kill you all.
Yep. Like, there's no more warnings. Like,
yeah. It's just like, I warned you with the massacre I did.
yeah.
This is enough of a warning. You should know.
No.
One of the interesting elements that plays against Anushzad being Christian is that after this rebellion, there are no follow-up persecutions of Christians like what happened with Mazdakites after Khosrow defeated his brother. So it's possible that Anushzad was just maybe supported by Christians, but himself wasn't a Christian, because Khosrow does not go on a big bloody purge of Christians. He just says, yeah, just keep doing what you were doing.
I see.
But okay, there's a brief pause in the plague. Let's attack Rome again. Let's go.
Now that the plague is not happening, let's get the war.
Yes, the plague is spreading west. We don't care about the west. Good, let's attack. So Khosrow invaded Syria again in 543, after the Romans had been defeated in Armenia and decided to take the city of Edessa, which was now the most important city in the east after Antioch. I mean, after Antioch was destroyed.
Ah, I see.
During the siege of Edessa, there was very fierce, hard fighting on both sides. On one occasion, apparently, there's a great story. Cyril, how would you scare? You're in a city. You're defending against elephants. How would you scare the elephants?
I don't know enough about elephants to know. I guess loud noises or like fire or something.
The Romans decided not to go with that. The Romans decided to tie a nice rope around a pig and then dangle it from the walls of the city. And apparently that scared the elephants into running away for some reason.
What?
Because flying pigs are terrifying.
Huh?
I don't know. Apparently it worked.
This is
wild.
Dangerously close to the cartoon stereotype of mice. Elephants are scared of mice.
Yes,
and if you show them a mouse, they will just run away.
I don't know. Are they scared of smells, I would assume, or something? Like, horses don't like the smell of camels, so maybe
I don't know.
elephants don't like the smell of pigs? I don't know. Elephantologists, get in touch. Would a pig scare an elephant? I don't know. Anyway, the siege was long and hard fought, and in the end, the inhabitants saw what happened to Antioch and didn't want Khosrow to make Khosrow's better Edessa somewhere next to Khosrow's better Antioch. So the inhabitants surrendered and accepted to pay a ransom for the city, so Khosrow managed to return home with all the money he was going to get anyway, without having to actually sack the city. The first phase of the war then ended with a 5-year truce, with the Romans agreeing to pay the Sassanids a literal ton of gold in yearly installments, which has the advantage of showing Rome as a tributary, which is nice. But this war still had more stuff, which Roberto from History of Sakartvelo, Georgia is covering in detail. If you want the detail of the war, listen to his podcast. It's good.
Yay, more war.
Woo. Anyway, in 548, the king of Lazica, this place in modern Georgia, changed sides and returned to the Romans, and this restarted the war. And this didn't go too well for Khosrow, with him attempting to build a port on the Black Sea, but being turned back by the Laz people, who knew their country well and managed to take back some Sassanid forts. There were then some counterattacks back and forth between the two sides, but in the end, there was a stall in the war, and neither side was able to overpower the others. Although the Romans did kill the Lazic king to avoid him switching sides again. In the end, the war lasted for several more years, until 557, when a peace treaty was negotiated and signed at the city of Dara, which resulted in a status quo peace, which was meant to last 50 years. How long do you think this peace lasted?
Well, it was 8 years for an
it's
eternity.
Not eternity. How much is 50 years compared to an eternity?
So, like 4 years?
Apparently 50 years is longer than an eternity.
Okay, I was
going
gonna...
lasts for 11.
That's not fair.
So there we are. The treaty agreed to keep Lazica and Dara could continue to exist, while the Sassanids would get 30,000 gold coins a year, though in the first 10 years they could be paid in 2 installments. So it was less embarrassing for the Romans. It looks more like just a lump sum payment and not just a tribute saying, please don't hurt us. We saw what you did to Antioch. Please stop punching us in the face. This was, again, officially to sustain military expense for control of the Caucasus passes, with 7 years up front because, hey, we need to take care of things. Also, there would be freedom of religion for Christians in the empire, which Khosrow was doing anyway, but now it's in paper. Also for Zoroastrians in Rome, but again, this was a feature we've seen before. It's mostly a saving face thing, where it's saying, oh, we're doing the same. There's barely any Zoroastrians in Roman territory, but we're still equal. Although, a caveat to this is that the Christians wouldn't be able to convert new Zoroastrians, but they could practice their religion. If you're already Christian, cool, but you can't make any converts.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, Serial, there are a couple more wars to get through.
Oh, gee.
Who should Khosrow declare war against? We've made peace with Romans. Great, love this. Who is our threat?
Can we just have peace? Like...
I mean, to be fair, in the background of all of this, he is financing culture and learning and building beautiful things. And, you know, I gave
the
it to you
fact that we
front.
can afford
He's
war
reforming things.
doesn't mean we should do war.
Yes, but Serial, all the money we have is going to some people. Do you remember who is getting a lot of our money?
Isn't it the Romans?
No, we're getting money from the Romans.
It's not the Huns, is it?
Yes, it is them.
It is?
The Hephthalites.
Yeah, from way back.
Yeah, because Kavad has sort of made peace with them in the previous episode.
Mm-hmm.
And managed to retake some territory, but the Hephthalites still exist, and we're still paying them money. And this time, Khosrow has decided that he would rather not.
Yeah.
And now that he looks at this map, the borders of the Empire would look a lot neater if the Hephthalites stopped existing. So let's do that.
Uh-huh.
And this time, Khosrow has the power of friendship to help him. The power of friendship and unimaginable violence.
Yeah, I was gonna say, friendship is not gonna win the war.
Because he's received news from the East. The Far East, actually. China's broken again. Who's taking advantage of this? It's a new people. Sarah, I don't know if you've ever heard of them. These people are called the Turks.
Oh.
They've just emerged from the steppe. Nobody's heard of them before, but they're popping up.
Player.
They're a new up-and-coming player in the steppe.
So we're gonna defeat the people in the steppe with more people from the steppe.
Correct.
Because that never backfired before.
Yes. Yes. Grandpa Peroz showed that was entirely fine and everything was okay.
Yeah,
so
we're not in this problem because of this.
But so, Khosrow took advantage of the situation and allied himself with the Turks. The Turks whose Khan is incidentally the son-in-law of the Chinese emperor.
Ah.
So that's fun. Nice connections.
Cool, yeah. The world is so small.
Yeah, it's nice. Eurasia is a nice place. It's just like, what are the odds that you'd meet the son-in-law of the Chinese emperor here? But yeah, Khosrow allied with the Turks, and in 557 to 561, when the Lazic War was wrapping up in the west, together they utterly destroyed the Hephthalites. They caused them to cease to exist. The people who had terrorized Peroz and almost threatened to destroy the empire, and had kept Kavad hostage, and had caused so much pain and trouble to Iran, they're gone.
Damn.
To be fair, a lot of the heavy lifting was done by the Turks, who killed the Hephthalite Khan and crushed the main army.
Yeah.
But Khosrow took all his forces and went all the way to the Oxus River, and he got all the territories south of it, and the Turks got the rest. They split it in half. The Oxus River is now modern Uzbekistan. And I saw it! It's a nice river.
Oh, nice.
Hooray! And yeah, this treaty with the Turks was guaranteed by the marriage of Khosrow to the daughter of the Turkic Khagan, which would result in the birth of a son called Hormizd IV.
I wonder why he has a number.
No, don't question it. It's just random stuff.
Okay. It was the fashion.
Yeah.
To give numbers.
Also, according to the Shahnameh, Khosrow wanted a royal princess, but the Turks tried to give him the daughter of the Khagan and a servant girl. How did they do this? Well, apparently, the Turks had all the daughters together, presented in a lineup to choose from. And all the daughters were beautifully adorned, amazing makeup, jewels, all that sort of thing, glorious clothes. But the true princess was unadorned and without treasure. She was just plain and on her own. But the minister that Khosrow had sent there chose the correct princess and said, "The king has plenty of crowns, thrones, and bracelets. I choose this one, who has no crown or fine adornments, since she is worthy to be elevated in such a fashion.
Wow.
I undertook the pains of this journey to make a good choice. I didn't come here for Chinese brocade."
Woo.
So, we got the real princess of full royal blood because you're not tricking us.
Because the king sent a good envoy.
Yeah. I hope the envoy got promoted. That's a great, good lines. But back to history, Khosrow also built a massive wall between the Caspian Sea and the Elbrus Mountains in the east to protect this entryway into Iran proper from any future nomadic incursions. To give you an idea of scale, this wall was longer than any fortification system the Romans had assembled, being more than 50% longer than Hadrian's Wall.
Ooh.
It is a long series of walls. And hey, they get to keep out nomads just in case. You never know. That might come in handy in the future, perhaps.
For reasons.
Because as you suspected, this alliance with the Turks could only last so long, and once the old rhythm set in, relations start to deteriorate. And in 568, the Turks sent an embassy to the Romans for an alliance, but nothing came of it this time. Something might come of it in the future. But we need to look at the last unaddressed border of the empire, Serial. What is the remaining border of the empire?
Wait, I need to imagine the shape.
We've done west, we've done northeast.
So south.
That is correct. What exists south of Iran?
Don't test me at geography. Because my first impulse was Egypt, but
Egypt is
that's not there.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's just because I'm still stuck on the beginnings of our podcast when Egypt kept being a nuisance. What is out of Iran?
It is a large peninsula, which will be very important soon.
Is it the Arabic Peninsula?
That's correct. Yeah. So all of Arabia's south. Let's deal with it.
That's a lot, though. What?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the Empire of Aksum, which is from roughly modern Ethiopia and Eritrea, which was a large Christian empire, not the Roman type of Christianity, but still Christian, they had taken over the kingdom of Yemen. And there was a risk, Khosrow saw, that in an alliance with Christian Rome, the two might gain a new dangerous Arabian front against the Sassanids. Maybe in the next war against Rome, they'll attack from the south as well. That would be unfortunate. There had actually been contacts where Justinian asked the Aksumites to cut off the Sassanids from the Indian Ocean trade, but nothing came of it in the end. But just in case to avoid this possibility, Khosrow declared war on the Aksumites in 570 and managed to conquer Yemen, which seems to have broken off of the Aksumite kingdom recently, so it was semi-independent, doing its own thing. And so now Yemen is part of the Sassanid Empire, where originally it had a puppet king, but then over the course of the next 8 years, it was replaced with a local governor. This not only has great political repercussions, but it also has an amazing trade advantage. Because now, the Romans can't trade with the East anymore through Egypt. We've blocked off the Red Sea trade, and they have to pay us to get through there. If they want to, and if the Romans decide to declare war, we own all of the Silk Road, by sea or by land. Having defeated the Hephthalites, we own all the lands there. We have an alliance with people from China. There is nothing north, and to the south, the Romans have no ports left. They used to be able to go through here, but not anymore. We've now have a stranglehold on all trade, going from China to Rome and vice versa, and we can trade with both of them freely whenever we want. So this is extremely good for the empire. And after the victories against the Turks, Romans, and Yemenis, Khosrow minted several coins which said on them, Iranians have become fearless, and Iranians become strong.
Damn.
Also, you might want to know that this same year, an elephant came to the city of Mecca. It came to be known as the Year of the Elephant.
Oh?
Can you guess why this might be important?
Other than the Romans scaring elephants away, I don't...
Well, because a child is born in the city of Mecca.
Oh!
His first name is Muhammad.
Right.
Second name, peace be upon him. That will be important for the future.
Yep.
This is going to be influential.
You
We'll
don't
see
say.
if it ever affects us.
You can make a religion out of this.
Yes. Legend states that very night in the palace of Khosrow at Ctesiphon, it was shaken by an earthquake, and 14 of its pillars fell.
Ooh.
And the sacred flames of the Sassanid kings, which had been lit for 1,000 years, were snuffed out.
Whoa. Excuse me?
The seers at court were only able to tell Khosrow that this was a prophecy that came from Arabia. Khosrow then asked his Arab vassal to find the meaning of this, and the only meaning that he found is that the Sassanid dynasty only had 14 kings left before it would fall.
Ooh, ominous.
I mean, our podcast says there's only 12, but who am I to disagree with prophecies? It gets difficult to count towards the end, so
I see.
fair enough.
Maybe they were right.
Now, of course, the stories are only in Islamic sources. Khosrow chose not to record these happenings.
You don't want to
But,
write when
you know.
when your empire is going to fall, you know.
Yeah, you don't want to write about prophecies of doom and destruction.
They're such a bummer.
Yeah. We'll find out at the end of the podcast what happens. This is important. We have a new child that is born. He is going to be influential.
Yep.
But that is all for today's episode, because we've had a long time, and we still have all the reforms that Khosrow does, and more war to get through.
Yeah, it
and
doesn't
he's
feel
going
like
to
we're
die eventually.
nowhere near the end.
Yes, we have gone through, let me see. It's 570, and we started in 530-ish, so... Yeah, we've done about 40 years, and we have a few more years and all the reforms that were happening in the background, together with all the art and culture and civilization. But yeah, thoughts about Khosrow, Serial?
He's really cool. I mean, you know, very successful.
Yes. He is
I'm impressed.
a terrifying man. He is extremely competent, but also the blood. Oh god, the blood.
Yep.
But also, he was nice to that old lady and her house.
Yeah, I
Nice.
guess.
That was neat. And also, Khosrow's better Antioch. That was good too.
That was very funny. You know, he has some moments, but like he's also terrifying.
Yes. I think that's going to work in his favor in the ranking eventually. Because we value being a terrifying, horrible person. There's just so much going on. You can understand why this episode had to be split, because stuff. He has defeated all the enemies of the Empire. He has defeated the enemies internal and external. And now there is prosperity beyond all our wildest imaginations. And he is continuing the reforms of his father Kavad, which required a skilled person. Like, Khosrow is one of these rare examples in history, like Ardashir the First and Shapur the First, where a really capable son succeeds a really capable father,
and then
they get to do what they wanted.
Yeah.
So, that's going to be cool. I wonder why the podcast is ending in 12 episodes. Surely nothing important. I'm sure it will be fine.
Oh boy.
So yes, we hope you'll join us next time, which unfortunately, due to time reasons, is going to be in 2 weeks, not next week, because we have the Patreon episode next week, so... Yeah. But hope you'll join us for the end of Khosrow the First, and we'll get to find out, how does that end? Will he leave a good future for his descendants? We don't know. Let's discover it together. In the meantime, as mentioned, you can support us by joining our Patreon. We have a bunch of extra episodes that are quite interesting, and you can look into them. We're going to have an episode on Pompey the Great coming out next week.
Right.
Do you want to know what happens to a republic when a strong man who should be convicted of many crimes is made leader? Find out.
Well,
interesting results. The end of the Roman Republic is wild. But we'll be talking about Pompey mostly in all the pre-Caesar stuff he did. I'm going to yada yada a lot of the Caesar stuff because nobody ever talks about the pre-Caesar stuff, and it's really, really cool. Pompey was really fascinating, but nobody ever talks about it. So join in for that. If you'd rather not support us monetarily, there are other ways to support us. We'd appreciate if you could give us a review on your podcast app of choice. Spotify allows for comments now. We've seen several of them. They're very nice. Thank you. We appreciate them all, and it lets us know that you're listening and that you're enjoying it. But yeah, in that case, without any further ado, we hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
bye.